Hey y'all, it's Farley with Writer's Edge podcast, and today we're going to talk about what's fascially possible for you and your horse. So today's conversation is going to be about fascia and how that affects you and your horse's health. I will, fall allergies have got me blue or hoarse or raspy or whatever other terrible pun I can come up with. So bear with me this week as hopefully we'll be a little bit better next week. So let's talk about fascia. Fascia is the connective tissue in your body that connects everything together. It is that gristly tissue. You cut it out of your steak. The main goal of fascia is to connect everything together. It connects muscles to muscles. You even have fascia around your organs. The thing about it is that it is a very big system that keeps your form together, that has no beginning or end. It is all connected. So this is really where we start with the whole body is connected. I tell people a lot of times it's like if you took a piece of saran wrap over a steak and wrapped it up, that's how fascia is. Now, fascia, the problem with fascia is that it can get kinked up. It can get kinked up, it can get tight, it can get wound up, just like if you took a saran wrap and balled it up and it actually stuck to itself. When that happens is that starts altering movement of the body. That starts altering pressure on different muscles, on different systems. And while on the onset, you may not notice it, it may not be a big issue, it can lead to chronic issues later on down the road for both you and your horse. The thing about this is that it's a very subtle thing that can compile on. Now, you may be sitting here going, okay, Farles, are you making up systems by this point? No, I'm not, actually. We've known that, in the medical community, we've known that fascia that it exists, and we've known that for a long time now, hundreds of years. But we've always, in dissection, in traditional medical schools, tossed it aside, thrown it away. So it's really just since the 60s-ish that it's really kind of becoming on as a treatment technique. It's gaining a lot of steam today, and I really feel like in the next 10 years in medicine we will actually be talking about fascia and how to treat it in more traditional medical circles. So treatment of this is called a myofascial release. You find a therapist that is trained in this. This is a technique that requires a lot of feel. It requires a lot of time. Because what happens in this treatment session is it is light pressure applied over a longer period of time, because we're getting at that superficial to middle layers of fascia. Now, there are more specific techniques, interesting enough, techniques to treat visceral issues inside the abdominal cavity, because it is believed that fascia can get tight around the organs and cause different internal things. Now, in the medical community, I'm going to be real for a second, and myofascial release is still considered pretty hippy-dippy. If you've hung out with me for a while, I use hippy-dippy to describe things that are not probably fully accepted by the medical community, don't have a nice little library of research to back them, but still work, because I am a true believer that of the human body or the horse, we still have a lot to learn. We've come so far and we can do so many things, but there's still a lot of things to learn and a lot of things to change in how we treat. Myofascial release, I believe, is a very good treatment tool for people who have chronic pain. What happens with the fascia is it usually gets tight because of repetitive motions, trauma, inflammation, scars. A post-surgical fascia can get really tight after post-surgical scars, or any combination of these things. Fascia being tight, like I said, is not always noticeable by the person, because we look through our own lens, right? And how we perceive the world is our normal, but it may not actually be your correct normal. So imagine if you had a person wearing a kind of a full body leotard, full body suit, and you had another person there, and they gathered up that leotard at the right hip, and they gathered it up real tight, and they gathered it up so tight that that person actually started to slightly lean and give in to that tightness. And then you ask the person wearing the suit to raise their arms over their head. And while they can do that, the right arm wouldn't go as high overhead as the left arm would. And the left arm might be even a little bit restricted from what's going on the right side of the body. And it's these little subtle things that can add up over time. In that example, if you are trying to give you a visual to help see this, but if you say in that example, you did have fascia that was tight at your right hip. This can cause several different things to happen. If you are a roper, this could change your mechanics of roping. As we've talked about in the past, that really your power and your stability comes from your core, from your pelvis. And tightness, whether it's a right or left hip, could change the mechanics at your shoulder, could change your roping. Okay? If you have enough of an imbalance that you are changing your weight bearing through your pelvic bones, that's going to translate into your horse and become a mirrored dysfunction in your horse. Because as we've talked about before, our horses want to work for us. Our horses want to keep us in the saddle. And so it's important to horses' health as well as your own. I also am a full believer that if you are doing a lot of strength training or anything like that, your fascia needs to be right, because if you are training those muscles and they are in a tightened position, then you are training them in that tightened position. And while you are gaining strength, I don't feel like you're gaining optimal mobility and optimal strength through where your tissue should actually be. Now, we can do myofascial release on people, as we talked about. We can also do it on horses. There are practitioners that treat horses as well. And same kind of process. It is a lighter pressure, longer duration type of manual therapy. They will go through your horse's gait, without the rider. They'll do kind of a little bit of it's very similar to a lameness exam performed by a vet, but they may ask your horse for other specific moves, like a small circle on the lead line, to see, to kind of stress the hind end, see what's really going on. They may actually look at how the horse's barrel sways from side to side, and a couple other subtle things that if you get really in tune to this, you'll pick up just like that. But otherwise may not really be looked at in a black and white or more traditional medical exam. Horses love myofascial treatment just like people do. It's very relaxing. It's can have some discomfort with it depending upon the tightness that goes on, but on the whole, it's not a uncomfortable treatment. Horses will get to dropping their head and licking and chewing and get those real big soft eyes. All the, really soften up and relax down, pass gas, all those signs that we look for in a horse's true relaxation when we are doing treatments. When people are being treated, it's, I don't know about the passing gas thing, but it's a very relaxing, very calming state that people can get into, because it's also believed that fascia carry emotional memory, that the cells of the fascia and the release of that can release emotional responses, because we do hang on to tension from trauma or difficult situations from years before, physically as well. And that can get a little hip dip for people, and I understand that, but it's not a far-fetched thing, and it actually happens in myofascial treatments often, that a person went in for, say, we'll hang out on the right hip example today, to work on that and have a very emotional response one way or the other, where they're crying or sadness, or you can go the other side of the spectrum, laughing like the Joker does, and just very extreme and outbursting responses. And honestly, that's a very good, healthy, healing thing to have happen as well. And it's not something to be concerned with or shy away from, because myofascial release can be a very good alternative to medications. If we go back to talking about people with chronic issues, if it's like a fibromyalgia, lupus, some of these autoimmune kind of things, it can be a very good adjunct or alternative. And if we're talking about just chronic orthopedic pain, maybe it's more of a fascial issue in origin versus a tight muscle or weakness or whatever. That maybe, because we've talked time and again on this podcast, that the human body is going to find a way to get the job done, period, end of discussion. And once it creates that pattern, it will always refer back to that pattern. And it may not be, and it may go through a kind of a wonky deal, right? Where you do have some tightness, and that will continue to latch on and tighten down and continue to drive those different patterns of movement and mobility that are less correct. That makes sense? So it's a good thing it's a good tool to have in your toolbox. It's a good person to have on your team. By no means am I saying that myofascial release will replace other forms of human or vet medicine, but it is, in my opinion, it is dang sure a good adjunct to have, as well as good system to go through, because as we continue to learn and grow and do more things, everything becomes less and less black and white and more shades of gray. So I hope if you are looking for a practitioner, there are several websites online. If you'll Google myofascial release to help you find somebody in your area, there are several different schools of thought that train people in equine myofascial release. If that's something you're interested in, or if you're looking for someone to treat your horse. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me at ridersedgetherapy.com. As always, I appreciate your time and helping move the conversation forward, and I will see you down the road. Thank you for listening to the Rider's Edge podcast today. We appreciate your time and attention. Thank you for always helping us move the conversation forward. If you liked today's podcast, please help us keep the conversations going by subscribing to this podcast, and consider leaving us a review so others can find us and join in on the conversations. You can also find more information by checking us out on our social media channels, including Facebook at Rider's Edge Therapy and Wellness, Instagram at Rider's Edge Therapy, and our website, www.ridersedgetherapy.com. It is there that you can book a consult for either you or your horse. Thank you, and as always, we will see you down the road.